Have you ever looked at the state of the world and just felt like the future is, well, a dark and scary place? You are definitely not alone. But what if that darkness isn't actually a bad thing? In this explainer, we're going to dive into Rebecca Solnit's incredible book, Hope in the Dark, to explore a pretty radical way of thinking about the future, our place in it, and what it really, truly means to have hope. So, I want to start with this quote. It's from Virginia Woolf, and she wrote it in 1915, right in the thick of World War I. It just kind of stops you in your tracks, doesn't it? The future is dark, and that's the best it can be? I mean, wow. It's a statement that really forces you to stop and think about our whole relationship with that word, dark. And that's really the core question Solnit is asking us to wrestle with. We hear dark, and our brain immediately jumps to terrible. But what if it just means unknowable, unpredictable, not yet written? What if the darkness of the future isn't some terrifying void, but actually a wide-open space of possibility? Okay, so here's the game plan for our journey today. First, we're going to lean into that idea of a dark, unknowable future. Then we'll totally redefine what hope even is. We'll look at why despair can be so tempting and uncover this kind of hidden history of how change actually happens. We'll wrap up by looking at the wins we usually miss and see hope not as a feeling, but as a tool for getting things done. All right, let's circle back to that Virginia Woolf idea. The future is dark. Not dark as in doomed, but dark as in we can't see it. This first part is all about getting comfortable with the fact that we fundamentally do not know what's coming next and why that might be a very, very good thing. You know how our brains are, right? They're basically pattern-making machines. And when you put a big blank space in front of them, like, say, the future, they have this powerful urge to fill it in. And usually they fill it with our biggest fears. It's probably some kind of evolutionary thing. But Solnit argues we just take it way too far. We turn the simple, neutral fact that the future is a mystery into this rock-solid certainty that it's going to be a catastrophe. But if you just look at history, it shows us over and over again how terrible we are at predicting anything. Seriously, think about it. Go back a few decades. Who could have possibly imagined these things? The Berlin Wall felt permanent. The internet in your pocket was pure Star Trek fantasy. It seemed way more likely Nelson Mandela would die in prison than become president. These changes weren't just unexpected. For most people, they were literally off the map of possibility. The world is just so much weirder and more unpredictable than we give it credit for. Okay, so if the future is truly a giant question mark, what does that mean for us? How should we face it? This is where Solnit's idea of hope really comes into play. And it's a total game changer, because for her, hope has almost nothing to do with what we usually call optimism. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Look at this comparison. Both the optimist and the pessimist are dealing in certainty. The optimist says, it'll all work out, which means I don't have to do anything. The pessimist says it's all doomed, which also means there's no point in doing anything. See that? Both of them give you an out. They excuse you from acting. Hope, on the other hand, is a full-on embrace of that uncertainty. It's the belief that because we don't know what's going to happen, what we do right now has a chance to matter. So here's the bottom line. Hope is not this sunny feeling that everything will just magically be okay. It's the core understanding that the future is up for grabs, and that very spaciousness of uncertainty is the room we have to work in. It's the space where our actions can actually make a difference. It is the absolute opposite of being passive. And let's be clear, this is not about putting on rose-colored glasses. As the writer Maria Popova so perfectly puts it, this kind of hope demands that we think critically. It's not naive. It looks directly at all the problems, all the suffering, all the destruction, and doesn't flinch. It's a tough, grounded hope that's ready to deal with the world as it actually is. And that means hope doesn't cancel out pain. In fact, a lot of the time they go hand in hand. Solnit brings up one of the founders of Black Lives Matter who said, "The movement is rooted in grief and rage, but pointed towards vision and dreams." That's it right there. Real, active hope can hold both the profound sadness for what is and a deep commitment to what could be. Okay, so if hope is this powerful, active force, why is despair everywhere? Why does it feel so seductive? Solnit really gets into the psychology of this, of why giving up can sometimes feel like the easier and maybe even the smarter path to take. When you get right down to it, despair is just another kind of certainty. It tells a very simple story. Everything is broken, and it's all going to end badly. And yeah, that's a miserable story, but it's also weirdly comfortable. It lets you off the hook. You don't have to try, you don't have to risk failure, you don't have to act when you don't know the outcome. All it asks of you is to give up. And Solnit points out a few common traps we fall into. There's the person who gets a sort of satisfaction from being the one who tells the hard truths. There's the burnout that happens when we expect total victory overnight. And then there's nostalgia, this longing for a perfect past that, let's be honest, never really existed. Every single one is just a different way of backing away from the messy, uncertain work of the here and now. The philosopher Ernst Bloch makes such a critical distinction here. He talks about a fraudulent hope, the kind that people in power often sell us. The don't worry, everything's fine, go back to sleep kind of hope. It's basically a tranquilizer. But genuine hope, he says, that comes from informed discontent. It comes from seeing what's wrong and believing it can be made right. It's a fire starter, not a fire extinguisher. So where does that genuine hope, that real world-changing energy, actually come from? To get at this, Solnit gives us this amazing metaphor that helps us see how history and power really work. So I want you to imagine the world as a big theater. All our lives we're taught to just watch the main stage, the presidents, the CEOs, the official headlines. The spotlight is so bright right there that it basically blinds us to everything else. But the real action, the stuff that's actually driving the story forward, that's happening in the shadows. It's happening in the audience. It's happening backstage. It's in quiet conversations, in community organizing, in art, in all the places that are out of the limelight. And here's the thing. Huge changes, revolutions, they don't start with a protest or a battle. They start in our minds. John Adams actually said the American Revolution happened in the minds of the people for a decade and a half before the war even began. Change happens when enough people start to believe that another world is actually possible. That's the real work, and it almost always happens in the shadows. And every now and then, those shadows just erupt onto the main stage. These events look like they came out of nowhere, right? But they were like mushrooms. You see the mushroom pop up overnight, but it's just the fruiting body of this huge, invisible network, the mycelium, that's been growing underground for years, sometimes for decades. So, if all this important stuff is happening in the shadows, how do we get better at seeing it? This leads to one of Solnit's most important ideas. We have to start counting the victories that we usually ignore. It's about learning to see progress even when it's not a big, flashy, immediate win. This quote from Walter Brueggemann just hits so hard. Amnesia produces despair. It's so true. When we forget the wins, when we forget how far we've come, we start to think change is impossible. The people who benefit from the status quo want us to believe it's permanent and unchangeable. But a quick look at history shows that's just not true. Solnit uses the massive protests against the Iraq War in 2003 as a perfect example. Now, by the main goal, stopping the war, the movement failed. But if you look closer, you see something else entirely. That public pressure almost certainly saved lives by preventing even heavier bombing. It built new activist networks that are still active today. And, maybe most importantly, it completely changed the mainstream conversation around preemptive war. What looked like a failure was actually planting the seeds for the future. And history is just packed with these kinds of forgotten wins. A nation winning its freedom after decades, a huge polluting mine getting shut down by activists, the massive, quiet shift towards renewable energy that's happening right now. These are real victories won by real people, and just remembering them is like a powerful antidote to the poison of despair. And that brings us to our final and, honestly, probably the most important point of this whole thing. Hope isn't just a feeling you have. It's not a mood you wait for. It's a tool. It's something you pick up and use. Solnit couldn't be clearer about this. Hope is not a lottery ticket you clutch while you're sitting on the couch just wishing for things to get better. That's just optimism, which, as we've seen, is another way of being passive. Real hope is the belief that your actions can help create that better future. And this, right here, is her most powerful metaphor. Hope is an axe. It's the tool you grab when the doors are locked and the building is on fire. It's not gentle. It's not sentimental. It's a tool for breaking down barriers, for creating a way out when it seems like there isn't one. It's a force for action. So ultimately, to hope is to act. It's about giving yourself to the future, even though you don't know the outcome. And that commitment, that act of engaging with the world's messiness instead of just giving in to despair, is exactly what makes these difficult, uncertain times not just bearable, but meaningful. So we'll end with this question, which is really inspired by Solnit's whole idea. It shifts the conversation away from, is everything going to be okay? and puts it squarely on us. What is my role in this? It's a call to find our own agency in a future that is dark, that is uncertain, and because of that, is full of possibility.